Chapter 20, Developing Materials for Speaking Skills by Dat Pao. I am Nicole Kate Patangan from Ables 2. This chapter first highlights some prevalent methodological trends that have influenced and shaped many essential components in the development of material design spoken languages. Second, a particular framework is proposed for designing materials for speaking skills. Overview: setting the scene. One way to understand the notion of speaking skills, as suggested by Bygate, is by viewing them into two basic aspects. 1. Motor receptive skills involves mastering of sounds and structures not necessarily in any particular context. Such mastery in how to enunciate and articulate the alphabets of the language. 2. Interaction skills involves making decisions about what and how to say things in a specific communicative situations to convey the right intentions or maintain relationships. The learner must be able to express him or herself to others so that there will be no misunderstanding. Speaking skills are best developed when learners learn to eventually take control of their own performance. When they learn how to control and use their words when conversing to other people, teachers must pay attention and make room for the students' speaking abilities, while letting them say what they want to say, and afterward the session must only be corrected. Second, language materials, as viewed by Tomlinson, should not be created not only by writers but also by teachers and learners. Tomlinson's perception coincides nicely with Ninan's view that teaching communication should be seen as a process rather than a set of products. Because writers won't be using what they produce, I mean that they will not execute it in a real classroom setting, making me think that it is best when created both by the teacher and learners. I agree on Tomlinson's view. Teachers will know what are the need of his students, and students also know what are their capabilities. Students view that teaching communication is a process rather than a product because this kind of skill is best developed when it is molded carefully. Example: for a child speaking, little words are acquired first, then phrases, then clauses, and finally they will be able to construct sentences. Trends in materials for speaking skills. Communicative revolution replaced mechanical language exercises. This change, however, was not perceived by many teachers and learners as a beneficial revolution at all, since it took away all the confidence learners used to have thanks to what they perceive as systematic and sufficient grammar input. Capability of catering for the diversity of need which exists in most language classrooms. Language teaching is full of choices and alternatives, and no one is totally sure of which way is right. Examining publishers' claim. It shows as a gradual transfer from a strictly communicative focus towards a more balanced view in teaching both grammar and communication, justified on the grounds that form and use are not necessarily two opposing areas. A proposed framework for developing materials for spoken language. This section proposes an approach compromising the five recommendations to guide how materials can be developed for speaking skills. Namely, 1. Conceptualizing learner needs. As Brandley indicates, it is important to look at both subjective needs and objective needs in the learner. Speaking proficiency and difficulties. If the learners had a problem with speaking, like stuttering, real life situations, or how students could use such lessons in real life in conversing to other people successfully, helping the teacher what is needed to be taught. Translating needs to subject matters and communication strategies. The more specifically the learners state their needs, the more appropriately the subject matters can be established towards appropriate sets of topics, situations, functions, strategies, registers, and key structures. 3. I, and identifying verbal communication strategies. Conversational strategies must be incorporated in teaching materials because they are essential tools to serve the communication of meanings. One way of doing so is by designing tasks for learners to act upon their interlocutor's speech rather than merely concentrating on their own. It is therefore essential to build into materials many practical devices that can help facilitate oral production and overcome those communication difficulties arising under time pressure. Bygates suggests five of them. 1. Using less complex syntax. 2. Making do with short phrases and incomplete sentences. 3. Employing fixed conversational phrases. 4. Adding filler words to gain more time to speak. And 5. Correcting or improving what one has already said. 4. Utilizing verbal sources from real life. One method to seek for practical teaching ideas, as suggested by Tay, is by taping learners' peer group interaction in the target language and analyzing it. It could be It is through this type of exercise that typical conversational difficulties or obstacles can be identified and translated into problem based strategies for the teaching of verbal communication. Another one is by finding opportunities to compare naturally occurring conversations. Researchers have provided some evidence that many conversations composed from the writer's own assumptions of spoken language do not always reflect actual contexts of use. It is because the writers only write or translate their knowledge into their work and not really observing or putting their shoes in the learner's view and how they can actually use the language in real life situations. C. Keeping a diary might also be a realistic way to collect resources for designing speaking activities. It is it might be true that keeping a diary actually help learners to establish and mold their capabilities in speaking. They can do this by overhearing conversations from public places. They might jot down these phrases or sentences that they can actually use from radio or television interviews, how this thing is called in their for their target language and can be translated in their own native language from watching drama or movies or even from our interaction with native speakers in the target language. And such data provided that it is relevant to teaching themes can always be recycled and developed into instructional materials for the classroom.
5. Designing skill acquiring tasks. The decisive step is to create relevant tasks that help learners in three essential aspects. A. To acquire new knowledge. Learners should be helped to internalize new language before making it become available to discuss topics, but also helping learners to self discover form and function. For internalization to happen, such language must be pushed further into an experiential process by introducing a series of small orientation tasks that guide learners toward readiness in both content and language for the communicative topic that will come later. Examples of these will be ranking exercises, brainstorming for keywords and expression, generating ideas around the topic, and so on. B. To learn rules of interaction. Learners can be provided with conditions to help them become aware of fundamental skills and develop verbal strategies in the target topic, provided with conditions to help. This is made possible by having learners read several dialogues within the topic, by getting them to listen to conversations read by the teacher or from the tape, and by drawing learner attention to and encouraging them to discuss characteristics of verbal communication. C. To experience communication of meanings. Learners need conditions for coping with meanings and need purposes for using language. This is made possible by giving learners roles to play, assigning social tasks to be achieved, giving them motivating and attractive reasons to communicate, utilizing gaps in learner knowledge, inventing conflicts that lead to personal debates, or making up misunderstanding situations to be fixed. A proposed framework for effective speaking materials, drawing from relevant academic discourse and personal experiences in the second language classroom. This section recommends a rationale for materials designed for speaking. Effective materials for oral communication should enable learners to actively 1. Focus on both sharing and processing information. Sharing information means discovering missing information from one's knowledge gap by learning about it from one or more partners, while processing information means communicating by exchanging what belongs in learner's individuality. 2. Respect for learners' control of meanings. This can be done by inviting learners to provide topics of their own interest, raise the question, talk about their own experiences. In the area of talking about their own experiences, eventually they will be able to express the thoughts and words they might use so that it will create they will be they will be more understood by the people to whom they are conversing with. And speaking about own interests, I bet everyone would love to talk about their own interest that will eventually help the learners to pick the right words, even though it's very minimal that it can only be somehow be understood. And choose how to participate. Utilize effectivity. Good materials, therefore, must be inspiring enough to steer and enhance individual learners' needs, interests, and abilities. 4. Utilize activity. 5. Utilize individual knowledge. If students are given an unfamiliar topic to write about, they can take some time to read or research for that purpose. But if they given an unfamiliar topic to discuss verbally, they are most likely to give up. So, in in making your students to enhance their speaking skills, it is important that they must choose their own interests in speaking so that there will be no hard time for there will be no time spent for researching more, reading more about the topic, preparing about the topic that will consume much time. Unlike with talking about their own experiences, I bet they have enough knowledge, they can express it, how they can introduce the topic from discussing it from parts to parts and then con- up to the conclusion. Become aware in ellipses in spoken language and move beyond the initiation response feedback model. It is important that after the lesson, the students will be able to begin a conversation, interact with our conversation, and respond to the conversation so that the results of teaching them will be seen. And next, evaluating materials for speaking skills. The questions below are recommended to help educators weigh the impact of materials for speaking skills and ensure that materials provide not only linguistic support but also opportunities for meaning to be engaged, as well as space for learners' cultural and affective values to operate in the learning process. 1. Linguistic support. A. Do, do the materials provide appropriate and sufficient linguistic input? Do the materials help students get familiar with many characteristics of spoken languages? Do they know that languages differ in terms of grammar, some words, just like that? Is sufficient enough vocabulary provided in the materials, or do teachers and students have to generate vocabulary? Content based and effective support. Do the materials satisfy learners with moments of inspiration, imagination, creativity, and cultural sensibilities? Do the materials contain visuals that inspire and support verbal learning? Do the speaking activities enable students to utilize their cultural and individual knowledge? Do does it enhance some knowledge to further elaborate for the second language learning? Do the materials provide conditions for unrestrained improvisation? Is the cultural content relevant to the learner's cultural sensitivities? Or is it okay with the learners to talk about that certain topic that has an impact on its cultural beliefs that may cause the students um, to think about studying this language, but it is against their cultural beliefs? Are topics controversial enough to stimulate debate but not too culturally inappropriate that they upset learners' feelings? It is it sensitive enough to consider the learners' beliefs and cultures regarding with the topic they were going to discuss in the classroom? Skill support. The speaking activities give students opportunities to both share and process information. How these tasks help students to further to understand better the information they have given and learned. Is a language presented and organized to effectively facilitate verbal discussion in chunks of speech? Though the activities enable learners to employ a wide range of communicative functions and strategies. The speaking activities encourage various forms of interpersonal communication, such as monologues, dialogues, and group discussion. How these speaking activities enable students to further use the second language, and if these materials used were helping to enhance the students capability to speak the second language. Diversity and flexibility. Are the materials flexible enough to serve more than one type of learning style, proficiency, maturity, and interest? Is the materials can be reused to another group, such as if this can be used to high school students, will it can be used to um, out of school youth students age ranging from 16 to 20, just like that. Do activities cover a variety of different proficiency levels? If these activities in the materials are having a step by step process to elaborate and tests the students' capabilities of speaking the language. These materials really testing the mastery of the students? Do the materials provide a variety of speaking activities, such as oriented tasks versus product oriented tasks, meaning focused tasks versus consciousness raising exercises, and involving versus engaging tasks? Utilizing research trends. What view and methodology is implied in the materials, and how does it reflect present SLA theories on speaking skills development? Are there conditions for meaningful input, language rehearsal activities for L2 data processing, opportunities for output production, and formative assessment for learning? That's all. Thank you for listening.